That's enough for that.
Mm-hmm.
Ready.
Good morning, my name is Yeva Gracheva and I've been a student here at SCS since the 7th grade, and today I will be talking to you about my experiences and what things I've acquired through my time here.
Oh, I set you up for failure. My mistake. I switched it.
Just blanks on the clicker.
I know, I'm so sorry. And then I'm doing it without my glasses on.
You got it?
Yeah. Let's make sure it's working. Aren't you ready?
So Agatha Christie wrote in one of her books, if it were a crime, a mysterious poisoning case, an assassination, these are the things the soul delights in. Now, the reason I can relate to this quote is because I want to be a forensic pathologist. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's a person who examines the bodies of deceased individuals and determines the cause of death. And they only focus on those who died from unnatural or mysterious causes, such as a murder or a car accident. So a forensic pathologist makes between $150,000 and $180,000 annually, and it depends on their experience. There is currently a shortage, not only here in the United States, but all over the world, because it's such a unique career path. You have to be able to be okay with very disturbing images. You're looking at murder victims here. Some other skills that a forensic pathologist needs is the ability to analyze and evaluate information to solve problems, document and record that information to have it ready for police officers and investigators, and also apply their knowledge of the human body, of anatomy, to recognize incongruencies and determine the cause of death. So my desired area for living is East Sacramento, because not only is it close to home, it's where I live now, but also knowing my neighborhood, they really could use someone who's going into this crime investigation field to work there. And the median income for that area is about $84,000, so I will be making. So how did I get here? I've always been interested in mystery, crime solving. Those are a couple of my favorite crime shows. And another thing that was a huge push for me towards this career was the science fair project I did in the 11th grade. We were testing the effects of temperature on how bright luminol glows. Luminol is a chemical investigators use to locate blood at a crime scene. After it's been washed away, it reacts with the iron and it glows a fluorescent blue. So in 12th grade, I also wrote a senior research paper on virtual autopsies. In the pathology field, there's this new technology coming in where instead of opening the body and trying to determine the cause of death by physically working with it, they use technology to do it without damaging it. That way they could reuse the data later on and the body wouldn't be already decaying or too decayed to examine again. So there's an interesting procedure. They inject the body with contrasts and they run CT scans, and if you inject it slowly, it'll go throughout the blood vessels, and you can see if one blood vessel was damaged, then you could see where that happened, and all of this you could notice without even opening the body. But if you give it a quick burst, the contrast will spread throughout the body, and you can look at the organs and notice if any of them are damaged. So for my senior project, I did it on the various constituents of sausages. When I first spoke with my mentor, I asked him, what can I do? This is such a unique career field. What project can I do for this? And he obviously said I couldn't work with the real human body, so he said to practice identifying different organisms in the sausages. And because they're made of animals, and human and animals, we both have fat, muscle tissue. So I did my senior project. I used a microscope with ultraviolet surface excitation we covered a sample of sausage in various dyes, and we put it under there, and it just showed where there are fat bubbles, where there are muscle, and it was really interesting for me to use that kind of new technology. So, Dr. Seuss said, you have brains in your head, you have feet in your shoes, you can steer yourself any direction you choose. And I choose to steer myself to Sac State. So there I will be taking a BS in biology and criminology, and when I'm finished with my major there, I'll be transferring to medical school. Some resources available for success. There's academic support services if I'm ever struggling in any of my classes, tutoring. I might need it for math. I'm okay, but I could get better, so if anything, I have that available for me. And of course, counselors if I have any questions about where I could transfer any of my classes. So the estimated educational costs per year is about $16,000 for someone living with their parents, and I'll be living with my parents because we live close by the campus. I've also applied for FAFSA and they accepted, and I currently have a job at my dad's company, A1 Appliance. I work as a dispatcher, I schedule clients, so I can use that money for college too. So from now until the summer, I will meet any other college deadlines I haven't met yet. So far, I've gotten all my financial aid done. All I need to do is placement tests. I will also finish here, pass my finals, graduate, and of course I'll keep working. So during the summer, I'll keep working. I'm also thinking about preparing for college by checking out any websites where I can rent textbooks for cheapest cost. I'll be attending the orientation at Sac State. Then I'm thinking about relaxing, taking some time to relax after high school, and my family's thinking about taking a trip to Russia to visit my family there, some of my cousins, and also I'll be working to get a driver's license over the summer. So during the fall, that's when I'll start my time at Sac State. I'll be taking my GE classes, some major classes in biology, and also, depending on how my schedule works out, if I'll have time, I'm thinking about a double major in forensic chemistry, because it'll be really useful for when I'll have to test for the presence of various chemicals in a victim's body. So, in one of my favorite movies, it was said, anyone who's ever going to find his way in this world has to start by admitting he doesn't know. And I think it's really important to recognize that as humans, we're not born with all the information we'll ever need in life. So if we want to acquire a skill, we must practice to perfect it. So here are some skills I've acquired in my time at SES. So my first artifact will be focusing on the skill critical thinking and problem solving, which to me means using your past knowledge and experiences to solve everyday problems. The artifact I chose to represent my proficiency in this skill is the CSI unit. In the 11th grade, the class conducted a mock investigation of the murder of a Lucy Alicon. We were split up into teams and went to a crime scene, gathered evidence, took pictures, and did various testing on blood and hair samples. My team and I were very successful in that we were not only able to identify who the murderer was, but also the time and place, motive, murder weapon, and the cause of death. To solve the murder, we of course used ordinary investigation methods such as interviewing suspects, keeping an updated police report, and we even drew a up-to-scale sketch of the crime scene. So reflecting back on it, it was really interesting to see how we were able to take small bits of information and put it together to get to the bigger picture. I learned how to apply the data we collected to analyze contradicting evidence and identify what information given to us by the suspects was true and which was false. We did have to make quite a few revisions, but that's just part of the investigation process. Sometimes I think I have the whole story figured out, but then we'd get a new piece of evidence the next day and I'd have to start from the beginning. So it was really interesting to see myself and my team grow throughout the investigation and get closer to getting all the answers. So this is a very important skill for me to have, especially for the career I'm going into. I'll have to apply my knowledge of the human body to like I said, recognize incongruencies on the bodies of victims and use that to determine the cause of death. I'll also have to learn how to make do with the information I have to get to my answers. So when you're investigating a crime or a mysterious death, you obviously won't have all the information you need to get all the answers. So that's where I can apply this skill of critical thinking and problem solving to get results. So for my next proficient skill, I chose communication and collaboration, and to me this means working well with others to reach a common goal. For my artifact, I chose my junior year science fair project because not only was it the first year I've worked with a partner, but it was also the first year I'd ever placed in the science fair. So I mentioned earlier that my partner and I were experimenting to see what effect temperature had on how bright luminol glows. This is also a crime investigation centered project. So my partner and I used the scientific method in our experiment. We researched our question, bought a luminol kit, and tested the intensity of the reaction in various temperatures. In the end, we got third place in the chemistry category of the 2016 SES High School Science Fair. So throughout the whole time working on the project, I was able to maintain communication and a positive relationship with my partner. We got to work together both at school and at each other's houses. We communicated through text messages, and whenever one of us found an interesting article about luminol or anything relating to our experiment, we shared it with the other through email and Google Drive. We had very little disagreements about anything, but where our opinions did clash, we learned to compromise quickly and peacefully. So this is another important skill for me to have in my future, not only for communicating with college professors and classmates, but also with my coworkers for when I start working in my career. I will also have to communicate my findings to the police and investigators, both verbally and through writing police reports. So it was good that my partner and I, we met up both in person and over things like text messages and email. So now a skill I believe I need to grow in is media evaluation and application. To me, this means analyzing and using various sources to clearly present an argument or idea. For this skill, I've chosen the Wind Energy Integrated Unit from 10th grade. That year, we had to design a wind turbine blade that would most efficiently convert wind energy to electricity. We also had to pick an actual site in California where we could set up a wind farm and research nearby roads, power lines, and any environmental laws or Indian preservation site laws that protected our chosen location. In the end, we made a presentation about our plan for building the new wind farm. I think what I most struggled with because of my need for growth in this skill was finding reliable sources and information and taking the information they gave and presenting it in a way in which it remained accurate and reliable. Also, because our final product was a slides presentation, I had to learn how to pick out and combine the most important bits of information from our sources into one final product. I also learned how to capture and transfer images, such as screenshots from Google Maps, like I did over there. Another important example of the use of media in this unit was that originally the wind turbine blade that we chose had to be designed on Creo, which is a computer software in which you design 3D products and print it out using a 3D printer. However, because many of us, especially me, struggled with using this form of media, we instead built our blades using cardstock and pieces of wood, which also had an effect on the accuracy and performance of our blades. So being able to evaluate and apply media will be a very useful skill for me to have in the future, because in today's era of new technology, even the pathology field is experiencing a shift from the traditional physical autopsies and paper reports to more technological methods, such as the virtual autopsies I described earlier. So it is very important that I grow in this skill, and to reach a level of proficiency, I will continue practicing evaluating and applying various forms of media in my college courses for things like presentations and research papers. Also, I love to write a lot of stories, so one way for me to practice presenting reliable information to others is through writing more historically based stories. That way I can practice doing thorough research on various topics. So Albert Einstein said, "What we do for ourselves dies with us, but what we do for others and the world remains and is immortal." And this quote is important to me because when I'm outside of school, also what I try to do for others is something that will leave an impact on them, not just something fun for myself to spend my time. So to show you what I like to do, I wrote and how I spend my time. I wrote it all in verse because I like it when things rhyme. I volunteer at church a lot, help out 3 different choirs. I also write lots of short stories when I feel inspired. I read, I draw, I play piano, I like to be creative, and of course write lots of poems, as I've just demonstrated. So throughout my experience at SES, I've learned a lot, and it has prepared me greatly for being independent. I learned how to speak professionally with experienced adults, such as during my senior project when I had to work with a mentor at UC Davis. I also learned to put together schedules and follow them. That was also a big part of the senior project. We had to provide an outline of when we will be when and what we will be planning to do on certain days and follow that. I also learned to plan ahead for college and do background research on topics of interest. And I think SES has strengthened my desire to enter in this career because it gave me the opportunity to research this career deeply, and I wouldn't have done it myself. So I'm glad that it allowed me to find out a lot of things about it, not only what I'd like to do, but also about myself and how I learn. So, thank you for your time.
So now we open it up for any questions that you might have, and that includes 11th graders. If you guys have any questions, even about the process, how the experience, her experience might help you. You might glean information. I wanted to ask you on media evaluation, the WIN unit, that's your course skill. What could you have done to gain the knowledge on Creo? And I'm curious about why you didn't have the knowledge in Creo. Like, where was that hiccup? Obviously, there was some sort of assumption on the teacher's part that you would have known that skill. So explain that part to me.
So originally, in 10th grade, there was going to be a competition between the 2 classes, Mr. Davis's and Mr. Critters, on which class has the best wind turbine blade. And at first, Mr. Critters, which was the teacher I had, he had us design it on Creo, but because he himself wasn't as familiar with it, and we used videos provided to us by Mr. Davis to learn from it, in the end we decided that Mr. Davis's class would be focusing on using the technology to make those wind turbine blades, and Mr. Critters' class will be using materials such as cars. Yeah, constructive.
So it was a trickle-down effect from the teacher. Okay, so if you need that skill, you know Creo is a thing, you know 3D printing is a thing. If you're in college, what can you imagine you could do about that?
I know there's lots of computer classes available and labs, so I can sign up for those and practice developing it.
Okay, labs, there are a lot of resources within departments to support students without taking the course, just to support them. Okay, and that's a really important aspect of what I've been trying to get across to you guys. When you need help, there is somebody there to help you. You just have to reach out and ask for it within the correct department. We talked about using the scientific method and your second skill, where you communicated and collaborated with Melody. What would you have done if you had more money and time on that project? Like, what can you imagine you would have done with that luminol experiment?
I think we would have taken it a step further and not only test the different temperatures, but also how it reacts differently to the different substances. Because in our research, we found out that luminol, it not only starts glowing when it reacts with blood, but also with bleach and, interestingly enough, horseradish. So we could have tested it with those different substances.
I haven't found out what's in horseradish. That's kind of cool. I disagree. Okay, and then you communicated your findings through the poster board and going through our science fair. It's not showcase, science fair, and you received third in chemistry. That's pretty cool. I will stop talking and ask somebody else.
I do have one question. I really appreciate your connection and the relevancy of your second skill, that was collaboration communication. You mentioned that you had some negotiating moments with your classmates, and you would communicate, and you maintain communication and positive relationship. Can you elaborate a little bit more of what that looks like, sounds like? Like, what did, like, you personally, like, what do you feel now as a result of that experience is your skill? Because I know that working with colleagues, keeping a positive attitude when someone's not picking up their weight might be, like, how do you really, you think is your, I mean, some of us develop those skill sets to negotiate in a positive manner over time. Like, what do you think is your strength in that area?
I think I got really lucky with my partner that it was so easy to work with her. We made sure to keep each other in check, so there was never one person who was doing more work than the other. We divided things, like if I would write up the thing, type up the information for the board, she'd focus on the pictures and the research paper and designing the board. But also I think what I've taken away from that experience was I'm still working on it, but I've become a little more open-minded, and I've also grown in that I'm not afraid to express my opinions anymore. So if I want something done, I'll communicate it out and see what they feel about it.
I want to piggyback on that, in that Yeva was shot down, I think, 3 times on her senior project proposal. We saw investigate sausages, and we're like, no, no, that makes no sense. And Yeva persisted and communicated to us, no, let me tell you how it's going to work. Because first it was just a no, and I realized I'm not communicating with my student, I'm just using the word no. So Yeva then turned that around when I first said, hey, why are you persisting on this? So I really became aware that, okay, I'm not modeling the communication. So when she really articulated it verbally and then in the writing, because we go through a proposal process, she persisted through it, and I went, oh, I get it. And to toot her horn, she was working with a professor at UC Davis and got lab time and equipment. So there's so much growth in there.
You did a fabulous job on allowing me to see your growth in the other two evidence and artifacts that you discussed, where I felt your presentation, this is feedback for you, really, because you did an awesome job, because you could even do like an awesome job, is going a little bit deeper in that area where you kind of brushed off like a big stroke. I communicate, collaborated, I maintain positive relationship. That's kind of like out there, like you just shared. When I push you a little bit further, you said we had our tasks divided. We were clear with each other. We communicated, and when there was a point where I needed to explain and check in, I did so. When I needed to speak up because things weren't happening, I spoke up. So having like ongoing pushing, whatever it is that you as an individual did and realized you grew in it. I think that was the takeaway. Good job.
Just a comment, and it's somewhat rhetorical, but in your mind, can you think about people who you still go to school with, who you might not have approached as a 10th grader by you were intimidated or you didn't like how they reacted to things you said, and just, I don't want you to answer it because it's personal, but if you can just in your own mind reflect on how do you approach those people now?
How would you?
Do you avoid them? And because I know as a sophomore, as a freshman, you avoid people that you can't deal with. But can you deal with those people now because you've said, I expressed my opinion and, so just something to think about because that's a life skill. You're not always going to get to choose who you work with. I work with her.
I know.
I think that also speaks to the gender issue that we've been working on at our school. These two young ladies are products of going through some experimentation of female-only classes, gender, and male-only classes. And I am also rhetorically, I've seen both of them grow in their voice and their presence in the classroom with their male counterparts. So they don't back down.
Any comments from our guests? Yes? Oh, no. You had comments, Susan.
I had a question about your media evaluation skill, and I appreciated you talking about needing to learn a lot of technology, and then there was this piece about determining which sources are credible. Can you walk us through a little bit of how this project, what did you have to do?
When we researched, we had to, like I mentioned about the laws, the environment protection laws and the Indian preservation site laws, we needed to find the actual act that was passed and look at the wording to make sure that what we're doing isn't, if our wind farm isn't breaking any law by by it being set up on that site. And so we couldn't just look up random websites where it just gave summary of those laws, and they might have been really old because I know laws get updated. So we had to make sure it was recent websites and written by reliable sources such as government officials.
So you wanted to make sure that what you were looking at was current.
Yeah.
And not just somebody's interpretation of the law or another version, right?
Ms. Gracheva, I see that for you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, go.
I have a question, but I can just wave my
Go for it.
Okay. Well, kind of coming back to this collaboration and communication, I'm just curious if you've had other projects, maybe not big, science projects or anything, where you worked in teams where you weren't so lucky in getting along with somebody, and what were the skills and lessons that you learned there, or that you feel like you've developed from those experiences?
Yeah, Yeah, actually, every year we have a lot of integrated units, and the two that stick out to me the most, where my communication and collaboration wasn't as good as it could have been, was the wood unit, like I mentioned, and we did a drug unit, and it was also in teams. We had to make a website informing people about the dangers of a particular drug, and it was always, we were very shy with communicating with each other, so we didn't get things done as fast as we should, and the quality wasn't as good because we were all doing our own thing and it didn't connect very well and didn't flow as nicely.
So reflecting on that, now you know that if given the opportunity to be your younger self again, now that you're 2 or 3 years ahead, what would you have done different? What skills would you have applied?
I would have definitely,
Strategies wise.
yeah, I would have definitely spoke out, and I think now I have the leadership skill a little. It's grown stronger, so maybe I would have taken charge of the situation with the groups instead of maybe just letting everyone work as their own.
I want to jump in on this communication collaboration. When you asked that question, I was like, that was my question. But I have a little bit of a shift, which is you mentioned making compromises as part of what you needed to do. It sounds like your partner was pretty agreeable.
Yeah.
And then since then, we've heard these great stories about you, like not compromising on certain things, like the sausage
persisting,
investigation. You explained very well, and we weren't left in the feeling of like, what was that? Like, you made it make sense to us. So I guess what I want to ask you is, how do you navigate that? Is there a story that you could tell where, because sometimes you don't want to, like, where people have trouble with compromise is refusing to let go of an idea or giving up too quickly on a good idea. So how do you see that, and what?
So before I really start to negotiate a compromise, I look at my idea and think, will this really make the project better? If I'm confident that this is for sure, this is what we should be doing, then I will not compromise. And I'll explain my opinion and my view to others. I'll have supporting evidence for my argument. And the reason that I didn't want to compromise with the senior project idea, first of all, the mentor himself gave the idea of working with straw session. So I was thinking, if he's a pathologist and he thinks this should be happening, then it must be a good point. And also, I thought about, well, if not this, what else can I do? I can't work with real human bodies, so that was also played a part in it.
Like, he's the expert. He's
Yeah.
When the first time you gave it to your teacher to evaluate, how was that proposal given? Because if it's like, who would have said no? I just can't even imagine.
I'm gonna pass the buck. Mr. Lund was in charge of Yeva Gracheva's proposal. I just delivered, but I mean,
It's very no nonsense.
we can't. So
Mr.
Yeva,
Okay.
Yeva, you can
I
explain
know.
the proposal
Okay,
process.
makes sense.
Yeah, he's a math teacher, so maybe he's not as good at seeing things connect in terms of science and biology. But yeah.
You should have thrown some numbers in there and the poundage. And
there
the
you
weight.
go.
Let's talk about the
Quality of the
process.
sausage.
First, phase 1, phase 2.
So at first, we had to, in the phase 1 proposal, we had to describe what we were planning on doing. It wasn't as specific as the second proposal, but we also had to make sure to explain how this project would connect to our career. So maybe the first time I wrote it, I wasn't as specific, but when they gave me the opportunity to revise, that was when I took the chance to defend my argument.
The first phase that you turned in, I don't believe, I'm willing to be wrong, but I don't believe it had the part where you were working with a mentor at UC Davis, access to labs. It was, I'm going to be in my kitchen. That was the vision. I'm going to be in the kitchen tearing these things apart. So then, like I said, I always learn from my students that I need to do a little more than, not approve, go back, do it again.
And Yeva, did you learn more about what would be involved in
Yeah.
the sausage thing? Like your first proposal wasn't what you showed us today about how it will highlight the muscles and the fat.
Yeah.
We can go easy on the math.
I at first thought that I wasn't familiar with the microscope, what it could show me, but so I wasn't sure if it would if I would be able to see like molecular structure. So when I actually when they rejected me the first time, it gave me the opportunity to contact the professor at UC Davis and make sure that I know what I'm getting myself into. And so he helped me explain a bit more, explain to me a little more about how this microscope can be used. So I learned that you can't see molecular structures. It's more about just very tiny organisms.
Just quick question on my part. Like, have you been in SES all your 7 to 12?
Yeah.
Okay, that's really well, good. And so you defended in sophomore, and this is your second defense and learning, right? Because we didn't start 8th grade before. Okay, all right. So the second. Okay, thank you.
Ms. Gracheva, I had a quick question for you. One anxiety-laden moment that I have is at points in which students say that one of the things that inspired them to go into a particular area is a television show that dramatizes that particular career area. So, in your particular presentation, hot out the gates, you were like, yo, this, I was about, and continue to be about criminal minds, TV stuff,
So
right?
cool.
And then I was like, it was okay. You did an incredible job of demonstrating the technical side of the career rather than the dramatic arts side of the career that's portrayed on TV. So congratulations, that was awesome. Good job. I'm curious though if there were times. I mean, you did you're doing a really rigorous investigation of this career, right? And I'm curious about moments in which you have been able to contrast what's happening on the TV show versus what you're learning about the actual technical profession. And like, have you seen inconsistencies between the two? What's the interplay like that been like?
Well, the TV shows weren't actually the first thing that inspired me. It's just always been something I was interested in. But going into the contrast between the show and real life, I've gotten a chance to speak with actual people who actually work in this field, and they made sure to tell anyone who is interested it's not like the TV show. So I expected it to be different, but I think the TV shows, by dramatizing this, they kind of give me something to think about, something to expand when I start working there. Just something I was curious about that could be answered.
Yeah.
Kind of a little bit of a shift, but a follow-up to that, which is, I think it's really great, and I always have my students pick like a career path, right, and really investigate it deeply. But I worry sometimes that then that may give students the impression like it's it or that, like it's that or nothing for me, right? And I went into college knowing I was going to be a marine biologist. And I'm not a marine biologist anymore, right? So I did get a degree in it, but and I think that's all very valuable, but I guess what I want to ask you is what skills did you learn in investigating the career that if you decide not to be a forensic scientist, like that you could use to figure out what else you might be interested in, or in thinking about how, there's people saying that like your generation is probably going to have 3 careers, not 1, right? Like what else, or what would you do to kind of find your next passion if you found out that this, although it does seem very much up your alley, wasn't where you wanted to go?
I think this might be sound a bit strange, but because I've gotten a chance to see how how things really are in this career, in this field. And because I really like to write stories, I think that maybe I could use what I know to write things that are actually credible, so they wouldn't be like the shows that are over dramatizing something. But I think writing mystery novels and stuff like that, that's another career I could go into as a writer.
There's another. So you've been here all 7 to 12, and this is your second defense. Do you do a lot of presentation in class? Just a general question.
I would say we do.
You do.
Even little things like after we read a novel, and there's usually questions we have to answer about what we learned from a novel. In the literature class, we also have to make a presentation about answering those questions and making sure we have evidence from the book to support it.
Personal question. Were you born in the United States, or did you come as an immigrant?
I came as an immigrant from Russia.
At what age did you enter?
3.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I'm good.
Yeah, I took a poll in my classroom, and I think it was 70 to 80% speak multiple languages in the classroom. So yeah.
Your command of the language and your presentation off the chart. Good job.
Yeva, what advice would you give these guys who are doing this?
Definitely pay attention when you do the integrated units and take pictures, because that's evidence you can use in your defense. I think that was one thing that I regret in the previous years. We weren't thinking about doing defenses when I was in the younger grades yet, but still, if you have a chance, take lots of notes on those.
You guys have any?
Did you just do that on your own, or is that
Those
part of
quotes
it?
were good.
Well, we had to make a smooth transition, and one of the options was to use quotes. So I researched the quotes that spoke to me the most, and used that to transition. It was like,
I love it.
It's, you know what, I will say it's easy to do, right, to pick a quote. It's really hard to make them fluid the way Yeva does and use them as transitions.
Yeah.
They can be really clunky in a presentation and kind of almost jarring, and I've seen it this last week. But Yeva does an incredible job of using it to weave her story. And that just is a skill that she has done. You'll notice that on the rubric, there's no place that asks or requires for a quote. Also, there's no place, just kind of lifting the veil here, there's no place where I ask or I have rubrified whether or not she can describe what the skill means to her.
yeah, I wouldn't think about
So that's in the coaching, just, hey guys, you know what adds a lot of power? Is if you can put that skill in your own words.
Yeah.
And that comes from the reflection templates that we do after every one of our integrated units. I ask the students to talk about it and kind of relate it. Yeva is a solid student, a good listener, and took advantage of coaching.
So I want to clarify, because that was my aha for sharing systems across the district, that was one of the aha is you state the skills and then you put it in your own words and then you proceed to how you develop. That was not part of the design. It was a different component.
No, they're coached to do it, and the reason they're coached to do it strategically, they learn this skill in drama presentation course. So it takes time for your panel to write things down, filling that space with what this skill means to me.
And so now your takeaway from her presentation is you're going to encourage more of that or build it into the design? Or no?
For me, it's a strategy that I feel like students, I give them the tools, I coach them with those tools, but I'm not putting that on the rubric.
Okay.
One of the reasons is we're the School of Engineering and Sciences, and I was telling Suzanne, many of my students find that very distracting when they give their presentation, they're very linear minded,
Mhm.
and I feel like I need to honor that and respect that, and they want to give the facts.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeva's rounded and able to take that task on.
I think just to kind of clarify, you have to have quotes that speak to you.
Mhm.
Even if you just have one at the beginning and one at the end, it has to mean something to you personally. And if you watched Yana's presentation, every one of them fit, and you could see her in that quote. So don't take it as I have to do this, but if there's something that speaks to you personally or has, then that's something you want to incorporate. And it's very appropriate to do it with SCS and me, or at the very beginning when you're talking about you and your goals. This is why. But for her, she's a writer. She's a poet. The things that she does and says, you see that in her. Every quote that she has, you see that in her, not something I would see in you.
Yeah. And I would also add, to me,
No,
what
you-
made that really next level.
Different author, different people would connect with you, and you could use their quote. My apologies.
That's okay.
Go ahead.
What she also did masterfully is that quote not just related to her, but it introduced the next idea. So something about the content of that quote just led you into what her next slide was about, which is like a plus thing, right? It's not a required thing, but it really adds a lot.
That's why I asked about it, because I just like the way she did it.
Yeah.
Maybe I can do that next year.
Do it.
Do it. Do it.
So
Start
Yeva,
collecting.
Rihanna, all my 12th graders give their presentation twice in front of their peers as a mock presentation, and they are scored based on that, and then they're allowed to do revision, because I'm all about revision. So when you did that, I think you upped your game the second presentation. You wrote that poem in like 5 minutes before class. And I've been studying poetry my whole life and can't do that. But yeah, so it's funny. Yeva gets up there and does it, and like Nathan's like, "Bah," you know, like how do I compete with that? And you don't. You're you, right? You're you, and Nathan's an athlete and a rapper and a poet, and so I'm going to see what he can do, and that's why it's not on the rubric.
So,
Wow.
just for the sake of time, and because we will have more opportunities to
Yeah.
talk to these students, does this feel like an okay time to
Yeah.
transit? Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. What was her last name?
Gracheva.